You know, usually when we talk about like a physical threat, the human body's response is just incredibly logical.
Oh, absolutely. It makes perfect evolutionary sense.
Right. I mean, if you're walking through the woods and you suddenly see a bear, your heart starts racing, your palms get sweaty, and your digestion just shuts down completely.
Yeah, that's the classic autonomic nervous system response kicking in.
Exactly. Your body is instantly, like, ruthlessly preparing to either fight for your life or run as fast as humanly possible.
It's a biological survival mechanism, and it's beautifully efficient. In a high-stakes life or death environment, it makes perfect sense.
Right.
Your amygdala spots the predator, completely bypasses your rational brain, and just floods your entire system with adrenaline and cortisol.
But then you take that exact same biological, physiological cascade and you transplant it into, a brightly lit, perfectly safe conference room on a Tuesday morning.
Yeah, which is a wild context shift.
It really is, because there is no bear, there are no predators, there is just like a laser pointer, a projector, a slide deck, and 12 mid-level managers.
And yet your body reacts as if it is facing absolute certain doom.
Exactly. Your mouth goes dry, your vision narrows, it's terrifying.
Well, it's because your brain is treating a social evaluation exactly the same way our ancestors treated a physical threat.
Wait, really? It actually can't tell the difference.
Pretty much. To our primitive brain, being rejected by the tribe meant exile, and exile meant death. So standing in front of a group of your peers, asking them to judge your ideas, it triggers that exact same existential alarm bell.
Wow. And that evolutionary misfire is exactly what we are going to dissect today. Welcome to the deep dive, everyone.
Glad to be here for this one.
So today we are exploring the ultimate toolkit for mastering something that terrifies professionals globally: public speaking. We're drawing from this incredibly advanced masterclass on English communication designed to take you from just intermediate skills to like absolute confidence.
And it's such a crucial toolkit, especially for the modern professional landscape.
Totally. And the mission for you, the listener, is simple. Whether you are gearing up to deliver a presentation in your native tongue or navigating the incredibly complex waters of presenting in a second language like English, this deep dive is going to unpack everything.
Yeah, the strategies apply universally, but they are an absolute lifesaver for second language speakers.
For sure. We're going to cover hooking an audience, structuring a talk, and surviving the dreaded Q&A. So, okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
Let's start with the big one. Glossophobia, the fear of public speaking.
Number one fear for professionals all over the world, standing up in front of a room to deliver a presentation is universally terrifying.
And doing this in a native language is scary enough, but delivering a professional presentation in English or any second language, that requires a whole new level of preparation, right?
Oh, the cognitive load of presenting in a second language just cannot be overstated.
Yeah.
I mean, even if you are presenting in your mother tongue, think about what your working memory is attempting to juggle.
Right, you're looking at the audience, checking your slides.
Exactly. You are monitoring their micro-expressions, trying to the sequence of your key points, regulating your diaphragm so your voice doesn't shake, managing your posture. Your mental RAM is already operating at like 80 or 90% capacity.
Right. It's like trying to run a really high-end, graphics-heavy video game while your computer is installing a massive system update in the background. The fans are whirring, the system is hot.
That is a perfect analogy. And then you add the linguistic translation layer on top of it.
Which just sounds exhausting.
It is. It's the equivalent of running a third massive program simultaneously. You are constantly, imperceptibly scanning a mental lexicon to ensure you are selecting the precise vocabulary required for a business setting.
You're running a real-time grammar check before the words even hit your vocal cords.
Exactly. This is why the fear spikes so dramatically for non-native speakers. It is not a lack of subject matter expertise. It is the friction of linguistic processing under the intense pressure of social evaluation.
Which brings us to the physical sensation of that friction. We have this culturally ubiquitous phrase for it, having butterflies in your stomach.
A very common idiom.
Right. But I've always found that imagery to be bizarrely gentle. I mean, butterflies are delicate, beautiful little insects. The feeling in your stomach right before you step up to a podium to speak to 50 executives does not feel delicate at all.
No, not at all.
It feels like a washing machine full of gravel. So I have to ask, is this feeling purely fear, or is it a mix of adrenaline that we are just misinterpreting? It's not just dread. There's an element of excitement to it, right?
It's a shocking mix, actually. Getting butterflies is a completely normal physiological feeling, even for native speakers. But it's a shockingly poetic euphemism for a very violent physiological reality.
Violent? How so?
Well, the reason your stomach feels like a washing machine full of gravel is because of vasoconstriction.
Vasoconstriction, okay.
Yeah, so when your brain sounds the alarm, it decides that digesting your breakfast is just not a priority right now. It violently redirects the blood flow away from your gastrointestinal tract and pushes it out into your extremities, your arms and legs, so you can fight or flee.
Wow. So that sudden absence of blood flow in your gut is the literal physical sensation of the butterflies.
Exactly. But to your point about misinterpreting the data, you've hit on a concept in psychology known as arousal reappraisal.
Arousal reappraisal. I like the sound of that.
It's fascinating. The physical sensations of anxiety and the physical sensations of excitement are, neurologically and physiologically, practically indistinguishable.
Really, just the exact same physical response.
High heart rate, quickened breathing, the fluttery gut. The context dictates the label. If you are strapped into a roller coaster clicking its way up the first drop, your brain contextualizes that autonomic arousal as excitement.
Right, because you paid for the ticket and you know it's supposed to be fun.
Exactly. But if you are holding a microphone in a silent room, your brain contextualizes the exact same arousal as terror.
So the goal of an advanced speaker isn't to take a beta blocker or do deep breathing until the butterflies disappear. The goal is to rebrand them.
Absolutely. If we connect this to the bigger picture,
Yeah.
managing these butterflies is the very first step of professional public speaking. Even professional speakers who have been on stage 1,000 times experience that autonomic arousal.
So it never actually goes away.
Never. The difference is cognitive framing. A novice feels the heart rate spike and thinks, I'm panicking, something is wrong. A master feels the heart rate spike and thinks, my body is giving me the biological fuel I need to project my voice and hold the attention of this room.
Oh, I love that. It is readiness, not panic.
Spot on. Readiness.
Okay, so we've rebranded the physiological panic into biological readiness, but readiness implies that you are actually prepared for the task at hand.
Which is where things usually go terribly wrong.
Right, because human beings, when faced with something that terrifies them, naturally seek out ways to protect themselves. They prepare. But according to the source material, the way most professionals instinctively approach presentation prep is fundamentally, often disastrously, flawed.
Yes, they gravitate toward two extreme ends of a spectrum, and both are massive traps. The absolute biggest mistake you can make, the first trap, is trying to wing it.
Trying to wing it, doing something without preparation or practice, just hoping you'll figure it out as you go.
Exactly. And while you might wing a casual conversation with a friend, you absolutely cannot wing a business presentation.
I want to dig into the psychology of this because it's honestly baffling to me. You have incredibly smart, highly compensated professionals who will just stroll into a high-stakes presentation assuming they can just figure it out live. Why do we do this?
That's a great question.
Is it purely arrogance? I know my numbers, I know my industry, I don't need to practice.
Arrogance definitely plays a role. Psychologists actually call it the illusion of explanatory depth. We firmly believe we understand a complex topic perfectly, right up until the exact moment we are asked to explain it aloud sequentially.
Oh, man. I have definitely felt that before. You think it makes sense in your head until you open your mouth.
Right. But more often than not, winging it isn't driven by arrogance at all. It is driven by avoidance.
Avoidance. So the lack of preparation is actually a defense mechanism against the fear of the presentation itself.
Precisely. Think about it. If you sit down in an empty room to practice your speech aloud, you force your brain to simulate the stressful event.
Oh, you have to actually hear your own voice.
You hear your own voice, you confront the gaps in your logic, and you feel a miniature version of that anxiety. People who are profoundly terrified of public speaking will often subconsciously avoid practicing entirely, just to delay experiencing that discomfort.
They tell themselves that the adrenaline of the moment will magically grant them fluency, I'll be sharp when the pressure is on.
Yeah, but adrenaline doesn't make you articulate. It just makes you speak faster, sweat more, and lose your train of thought completely. You must know your material inside out, completely and thoroughly.
But, and this is the crucial counter tip from the material, knowing your material inside out does not mean knowing it word for word.
Never. Do not memorize your speech word for word.
This is the second trap, right? The robot effect.
Yes. Memorizing word for word makes you sound like a robot. It is the most counterintuitive hurdle, especially for a non-native speaker to overcome.
But isn't it tempting to write it all out so you don't mess up the English vocabulary? It feels like building a safety net.
The logic seems sound to the speaker. If my biggest fear is using incorrect English grammar or forgetting a crucial piece of industry vocabulary, I will eliminate that risk by writing a perfect script and committing it to memory.
But I look at verbatim memorization less like a safety net and more like walking a tightrope. It demands absolute flawless execution.
That's exactly what it is, a tightrope.
You step out onto the wire, and your brain is entirely focused on placing one word exactly in front of the other. But what happens if somebody coughs? What happens if you get a slightly weird look from the front row and you drop a single word?
The entire cognitive architecture collapses. This is the anatomical mechanism behind a brain freeze.
A brain freeze because of one missed word.
Yes, because when you memorize a script, you fundamentally shift your brain's operating system. You transition from semantic memory, which is the storage of meaning and concepts, to serial recall, which is the storage of a specific sequence of items.
Reciting versus communicating.
Exactly. When you are communicating naturally, your brain is focused on the ultimate destination of the thought. If you forget the word utilize, your brain effortlessly substitutes the word use without breaking a sweat.
Because the underlying meaning remains intact.
Right. But when you are reciting a memorized script, your brain isn't thinking about the meaning anymore. It is focused entirely on the sequence. Word A must be followed by word B, which must be followed by word C.
And if word C just evaporates from your mind,
the chain shatters. Your brain throws an error code because it cannot locate the next sequential link. You freeze, the silence stretches. And worse, that autonomic nervous system we talked about earlier kicks into hyperdrive.
which floods you with cortisol, which probably makes your memory even worse, right?
Exactly. It further impairs your memory retrieval, and the presentation derails completely. Instead, you should only memorize your structure and your key transition phrases.
You memorize the structure. Okay. So we abandon the verbatim script and we architect a journey instead. And that journey begins the absolute second you open your mouth.
The first 30 seconds are critical.
Let's talk about those first 30 seconds, because if we aren't memorizing a script, we need a structure that hooks them immediately.
The necessity of grabbing the audience's attention in that window cannot be overstated. The human brain is incredibly stingy with attention. It is a scarce resource.
Which makes the standard corporate presentation opening almost criminal, in my opinion. The default is always something so boring like, hello, today I will talk about our Q3 software sales, or thank you for coming, my presentation is about the new marketing strategy.
It's pure white noise. We have habituated to those phrases. When the brain encounters predictable, non-threatening, low-value stimuli, it actively tunes it out to conserve energy.
So my brain just shuts off immediately.
Opening with your topic is the fastest way to trigger that habituation.
So we have to break the habituation. We need a hook, something that bypasses the white noise filter entirely.
Specific hook strategies are key here. A surprising statistic, a short story, or a thought-provoking question.
The masterclass provides this brilliant example of a hook replacing that boring software intro. Imagine standing up and instead of saying, today I will talk about software, you look at the room and say, raise your hand if you spend more than 3 hours on administrative tasks this week.
That is so much more effective.
Right. You pause, let them raise their hands, and then you say, what if I told you we could cut that time in half? Today, I'm going to show you how.
Let's dissect the mechanics of why that specific hook works so well. First, it breaks the physical passivity of the room. By asking them to physically raise a hand, you are snapping them out of the passive audience posture and forcing active participation.
It changes the dynamic from a monologue to a dialogue, even if it's just a, kinetic dialogue.
Exactly. Second, you are immediately identifying a universal pain point. You aren't talking about your software. You are talking about their lost time. You are centering their experience.
And people care about their own experience more than anything else.
Always. And third, you offer a dramatic, high-value resolution to that pain. The dopamine hit of a potential solution guarantees their attention for the next phase of the talk.
I am going to solve your problem.
Right.
It's totally irresistible. Now, having their attention in the first 30 seconds is one thing. Keeping it over a 20-minute presentation is another challenge entirely.
Which brings us to an essential C2 advanced level skill, signposting.
Signposting. Think of them as road signs on a highway that tell the audience where they are and where they're going.
It is the structural glue of a great presentation. It's how you manage the audience's cognitive load over time.
Right. And to give an example from the source material, a speaker might say, I've divided my presentation into 3 main parts. First, I'll touch upon, next we'll move on to, and finally I'll wrap up with.
Yes, touch upon, move on to, wrap up. Those are classic signposting phrases.
I love the GPS analogy of signposting, but I have to challenge this a little bit. When you are actually delivering a presentation, doesn't outlining exactly what you're going to say ruin the surprise?
Not at all.
Doesn't it feel a bit repetitive to say, first I'll do this, then I'll do that? I feel like I'm spoiling my own presentation.
What's fascinating here is that intermediate speakers constantly fall into this trap. They confuse their own cognitive experience with the audience's cognitive experience.
What do you mean by that?
To you, the speaker, who has lived with this material for 3 weeks, saying first X, then Y, feels agonizingly redundant. You already have the mental scaffolding built. You know the terrain.
Right, because I built the presentation.
Exactly. But the audience doesn't. They are encountering this information for the very first time. Their brains are desperately trying to build a structural framework to house the facts you are throwing at them.
Okay, I see.
If you don't provide the framework, you don't say, here is the bucket for X and here is the bucket for Y, their brains have to expend massive amounts of energy trying to figure out how your current point relates to your previous point.
And if they are spending mental energy organizing your data, they aren't absorbing your insight. They're just stressed out.
Right. What feels repetitive to the speaker is actually a lifeline for the listener. Using signposting phrases organizes the information, making the speaker sound incredibly fluent and keeping the audience from getting lost.
It's an act of, profound cognitive hospitality.
That's a beautiful way to phrase it.
You're doing the heavy lifting for them. Okay, so we have them hooked, and we are guiding them down a perfectly signposted highway. But now we are in the middle of the presentation where 2 massive traps await: your slides and your own rambling mind. Let's start with the visual pitfall.
Yes. Death by PowerPoint.
The universally dreaded phenomenon. It is a global corporate epidemic.
It truly is. Everyone has suffered through it.
The defining characteristic of death by PowerPoint is when a speaker puts a giant wall of densely packed text on a slide, turns their physical body away from the audience to face the screen, and simply reads the slide out loud.
And it immediately puts the audience to sleep.
It is excruciating. I always compare it to a terrible karaoke performance.
Corporate karaoke, that is phenomenal.
Think about it. When someone goes up to sing karaoke and they are completely paralyzed by stage fright, what do? They clutch the microphone, turn their back to the crowd, stare dead-eyed at the lyrics scrolling on the monitor, and just read along.
They completely sever the connection with the room.
Exactly, because looking at the screen feels safer than looking at the expectant faces of the audience.
And that severance of connection is the first fatal flaw. Reading slides destroys engagement because it eliminates eye contact, which is the primary mechanism of trust in human communication.
But it's not just the physical disconnection, right? The actual cognitive process of reading a slide aloud to people who can read it themselves creates intense mental friction.
Oh, definitely. It comes down to something called the redundancy effect. The human optic nerve and visual processing centers are incredibly fast. We read silently at a significantly faster rate than we speak.
So if I throw a paragraph of text on a slide,
your audience will scan and comprehend that paragraph in roughly 10 to 15 seconds. But it's going to take you 45 seconds to read it out loud.
So for 30 seconds, the audience's brain is just idling. They're waiting for me to catch up to what they've already read.
Exactly. The auditory input you are providing is perfectly redundant to the visual input they have already processed. It duplicates information unnecessarily. This mismatch creates intense boredom and frustration.
If the slide contains the entirety of your message, you as the speaker have rendered yourself entirely obsolete. You could have just sent an email.
Which is why the solution is that slides should be a visual aid, not a script. They must be concise, giving a lot of information clearly and in a few words.
A simplified graph, a massive solitary number, something that requires your verbal explanation to unlock its actual meaning.
You must remain the vital component of the presentation.
Okay, so we fixed the visual trap, but what happens when the trap isn't on the screen but in your own mouth? The verbal trap. Going off on a tangent.
Suddenly starting to talk about a completely different, unrelated subject. It is a very common side effect of nervousness.
You see it happen all the time. A speaker gets a little nervous, their brain starts desperately firing off random associations, and suddenly they abandon the main point and are 5 minutes deep into a convoluted story about, their commute to work.
It is the verbal equivalent of fleeing the scene. The anxiety spikes, the brain seeks safety, and it finds temporary comfort in over-explaining a trivial, familiar detail.
But the audience feels it instantly. It creates this palpable secondhand embarrassment in the room. You sit there silently praying, the speaker finds their way back to the highway.
And this is where the speaker's reaction to their own tangent dictates their professional survival. If they panic, apologize profusely, and look flustered, the audience realizes the pilot has lost control.
But the masterclass provides this elegant, incredibly potent rescue phrase to pull, an emergency ripcord. If you realize you are rambling, you simply stop, take a breath, and say, I digress.
I digress. Meaning, I have wandered away from the main topic. Let's get back to the main point. Here's where it gets really interesting. This phrase is framed as an elegant, advanced-level phrase because it demonstrates total self-awareness and control.
I find the psychology of this so brilliant. Instead of panicking because you rambled, you smoothly acknowledge it and steer the ship back on course.
Exactly. When you are rambling, the audience is experiencing low-level anxiety. When you pause and say, I digress, you instantly relieve their anxiety. You signal that you are totally self-aware and you are choosing to get back on track.
It turns a moment of chaotic weakness into a deliberate demonstration of self-correction. It's an amazing tool. Okay, so you've successfully navigated your slides and tangents and you deliver your closing line. But you still face the final boss.
The Q&A session.
The Q&A is often the scariest part because it is completely unpredictable. You can no longer control the script.
It is a radical shift in the power dynamic. A hostile question or a wild technical query can just materialize out of nowhere.
But there are tactics to survive it. Tactic 1, validate the question, saying, that's a great question. Thank you for bringing that up.
On the surface, it just sounds polite, but functionally, it gives you a crucial extra 2 seconds to think. It acts as a cognitive buffer.
Because your brain experiences a micro-freeze when hit with an unexpected question, right?
Yes. Your brain has to parse the syntax of the question, search your memory, and formulate a response. By standardizing your initial response with a validation phrase, you give your brain a runway. You eliminate the dead air and prevent visible panic.
It is a brilliantly functional piece of verbal filler. But let's look at the worst-case scenario. They ask a question, you deploy your buffer, but your brain comes back empty. You don't know the answer. The second tactic here is professional honesty.
Never guess and never lie if you don't know the answer.
But we have to acknowledge how fiercely this conflicts with human ego. When we are standing in front of people, our ego screams at us to invent an answer so we don't look foolish.
It takes a lot of discipline to admit you don't know something when all eyes are on you.
It really does. The psychological pressure to bluff your way through it just to protect your status is overwhelming.
But this raises an important question. How do we view authority in presentations? Novice speakers assume authority comes from omniscience, from knowing everything. But high-level professionals know that authority is derived from trustworthiness.
Trust over omniscience.
Always. Admitting you need to check your notes actually builds more trust than fumbling through a guessed answer. It is perfectly acceptable for a professional to not know everything.
But you shouldn't just bluntly say, I don't know, right? That feels a bit too jarring.
Right. Blunt ignorance degrades confidence. Instead, you use the high-level response from the toolkit. I don't have those exact figures off the top of my head, but I would be happy to look into it and get back to you this afternoon.
Off the top of my head, meaning giving information from memory without checking notes.
Exactly. Using an advanced phrase like off the top of my head paired with a promise to follow up sounds incredibly natural, competent, and professional.
You are signaling. I value precise, documented accuracy over reckless guesswork. It elevates the standard of the room.
And it transforms the missing information into an opportunity for service. But the cardinal rule is, always ensure you actually follow up. If you promise an email, it must arrive.
Cementing your reputation as someone entirely reliable. So, we have unpacked an immense amount today. Let's recap the journey. We started by embracing the butterflies as biological readiness.
We learned to avoid the temptation to wing it, or conversely, to over-memorize and sound like a robot.
We used hooks to grab attention and signposting to guide the audience's cognitive load. We avoided the visual trap of death by PowerPoint.
We used I digress to gracefully control verbal tangents.
And finally, we survived the Q&A without guessing, relying on professional honesty and strategic follow-ups. Whether you are prepping for a boardroom meeting or just a casual team update, these tools take you from merely surviving the spotlight to completely owning it.
It's a complete paradigm shift. And I'd like to leave you with a final thought to mull over.
Oh, absolutely. Go for it.
Think back to the absolute best, most captivating presentation or speech you have ever watched. Does they seem like they were just naturally gifted? Or, now that you know the toolkit, can you spot the invisible signposting, the calculated hooks, and the careful conciseness they use to keep you entirely under their spell?
Seeing the matrix, I love that.
Yep,
Because
sitting-
magic on a stage is almost never an accident. It is meticulous architecture. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. See you next time.